very good evening and welcome to the Mansfield Matters Podcast. After coming back to rescue a point on Saturday at Colchester United, there's a big question in the air. And that is, when all said and done, done as in D-O-N-E, not Davis Keeler Dunn, does the performance actually matter as long as we get the results? Does it matter about playing sexy football, the fluid stuff that gets us on the edge of our seats? When all we need to do is just accept that sometimes it needs to be a little bit ugly, as long as the points come home with us. Tonight we'll reflect on that performance at Colchester United and try and answer that big question of whether football being a results-based business is what it's all really about. As always, we welcome and invite your comments, questions and opinions in the live feed on the show for the fans, by the fans. Why? Because Mansfield always matters. Get involved with the show in the live feed now and have your say on your team. Hello, good evening and welcome to the Mansfield Matters Podcast, the show for the fans, by the fans. Hope that you're all having a great week and are still happy that the Stags managed to rescue that point on Saturday afternoon at Colchester. To be honest, I was about 3 seconds from getting up and going into the kitchen to make a cup of tea and put the tea on. And then I thought, hang on a minute, something's brewing here. And then Davis Keeler Dunn popped up and scored that absolute worldie, which just goes to show that it doesn't matter how you play sometimes. Football truly is a results-based business. Joining me to talk all about that tonight, let's say hello, good evening and welcome to Mr. Alan Wilson. Good evening.
Good evening, Craig. Good evening, everybody.
And let's say hello to the man who tonight has come in fancy dress as a pilot. It's pilot parking. Good evening, Clive.
Yes, I'm in the Luftwaffe. I just dropped all my bombs on Bellamy Road Estate.
Well, that's all right. I don't live there anymore, so that's...
No, it did 30 quid's worth of damage.
Well, that's about right, to be fair. Hello and welcome to the show to all of you. Thanks so much for joining us as ever tonight. I don't know if anyone would have noticed, but the intro at the start, I went to play it on my little screen and it wasn't there, so I had to make it up as we went along. Nobody will have noticed, so I don't know why I just said all that. Anyway, let's move on with the show. It's all going wrong tonight. As always, we need your guys' comments and questions and opinions in the live feed, so do get involved in the chat below now. Clive, on Saturday afternoon, with seconds to go, I was ready to go into the kitchen, put the kettle on and put the tea on. Were you ready to get your coat and head back to the bus and make an early exit from the ground, or did you believe that Mansfield could muster up a little bit of Mansfield magic?
No, I thought we were going to lose the game, and I thought on balance we probably deserved to. But having said that, they worked incredibly hard in the second half of the second half, and I think the goal was probably merited on the work rate. We gave Colchester a little bit too much respect, in my opinion, although, to be fair, they played far better than I personally expected them to do. And their game plan was well thought through. They were pressing us hard and high, and we didn't have the form that we've had in previous weeks to deal with that.
Alan, Adam in the comments says, I'd forgot how nerve-wracking 1-0 down at 90 minutes actually is. He's not wrong, is he? Because with Mansfield Town, anything could happen.
And usually does, to be fair, Craig. Yeah, I think it's like Clive said, they worked incredibly hard in the second half of the second half, because they seemed to play, they seemed to be a little bit more fluent than they had been. But I really thought that they missed Maris, personally. Aaron Lewis was doing his fine thing like he normally does, and Mr. Reid were pinging the balls left, right and centre. But I just think, I think we missed that energy from Maris, personally. But a point is a good result there, and we go onwards and upwards.
Did it feel like Mansfield missed Maris, Clive, in that game on Saturday?
It wasn't just Maris we were missing. We desperately need a Quinn-like character back in the side, and we missed the pace that Oates alone seems to give us. Take all those things out, and Maris, and we had also a wasted shirt in Hiram Boateng in the first half, and I just thought we were asking too much of a team that wasn't or didn't seem to be as up for it as they had been in previous games. So when they scored deservedly, I thought this is the day the record changes from being unbeaten to being beaten. And I wouldn't have been too upset. I personally don't mind losing if we deserve to lose. I hate losing when we don't deserve to, but we would have done on Saturday. And the fact we actually got a point, I put in my headline, one of my headlines on social media, we stole a point, call the police, because we did. And it's great if you think about it. In a full season, if you're the sort of team that can play bad and win, or play even worse and get a point, it stands you in good stead, providing you can win your home games for promotion.
Well, that's the whole point in the conversation, isn't it, Alan? Because we've gained a reputation over the last 4 or 5 weeks or so since the season's begun of being this sexy, fluid side that likes to knock it about and really pass between the lines and really stretch teams. When realistically, you know, you've got to do the ugly side of the game too. You've got to accept that some opponents will prove, if I can get my words out, difficult to break down, as Colchester did, and sometimes you've got to play ugly.
And I think they played well against, from all accounts, they played well against Gillingham as well. You know, either the week or 2 weeks before, prior to that. And I think they've done the homework. Like there's 1 or 2 teams will do against Mansfield. Pat Barrow will probably do the same Saturday. But you know, they've got to knuckle down. And you know, even if they can't play the attractive football that we're quite used to, it's still a point. And if we can win us home games and get a point away, you know what that means.
Yeah.
If there's a positive in all this, we still at the end of the game had the energy that the game needed, and they seem to have lost theirs. So maybe that's a reflection on overall fitness.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, Clive, because, you know, you look at Mansfield in previous seasons under Nigel Clough, and as games went on, it would be more and more difficult to get back in the game. You would have that sense that they wouldn't do so, but certainly second half of games, when we're trailing or when we've not had a good first half, we do seem to come out with a little bit of rocket. And for all the negativity we talk about the medical team or whatever, about picking up the constant injuries that we do, you can't knock the effort and endeavour that's gone into stepping us up a level in terms of fitness this season so far.
Is that for Clive or me? I thought you were talking to Clive. But yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree with 100%, Craig. They are. They seem really fit, and they're fighting right to the end. But I thought there was 1 or 2, apart from missing Maris, there were 1 or 2 that weren't quite at the races. You know, I was surprised at Akins. I know Cloughie took him off, but he wasn't quite at the races. But, you know, there were 1 or 2 of them like that on Saturday, I thought.
It's surprising because I thought, having had a whole week off, the team would have been peppy, but they weren't. And they came out better in the second half. And as the second half went on, they became the better of the 2 sides. But we need to start better than we did.
Yeah, I think sometimes as well, it's about making better of your mistakes, because we weren't playing great, but realistically, when you look at it, Clive, the one thing which we did do was make an error. It was an error which led to their goal, and had we not made that error, we wouldn't have conceded, and you know, we might have gone on to then win the game. But I think that the biggest thing is for Lewis Brunt to learn from that. He went high up the pitch to try and win it. His touch was woeful, to be fair, and an experienced defender will drop back and get back into position. He had a little bit of a rush of blood, chased the ball and left the little gap for them. And I think the biggest thing for him is just getting that out of his system and going into the next game.
Well, I listened to his post-match interview, and he doesn't seem to have had a confidence knock as a result of that. And neither should he. He's a player on a learning curve at the end of the day. And overall, he's played well. But there was a definite error. If I'm disappointed about anything, there was nobody covering.
Yeah.
So once he'd gone, that was it. The guy who got the ball, he got a freedom of the park, really. And I think that typifies some of the goals we've conceded over the last season and a half. Make a mistake deep in midfield and then pay for it at the end.
Yeah, and hopefully we can try and cut out them as the season goes on. One thing I want to try and avoid, Alan, on the back of this is really the first game of the season so far that we've been poor in all areas of the pitch for a long period of time. And what I want to avoid is teams building on that and sort of magnifying those errors and those areas of weakness. We as a team have got to learn to adapt, and when things aren't quite going our way, have that little bit of leadership and something within us to pull us through and to make sure that we're not going to make those mistakes, that we are doing the basics, cover if someone goes forward. And, if you can't string a few passes together, just knock it long for a while and just change your game and get that focus back.
I think that's what Nigel will, make sure that he puts over this week, or he will have put over, should I say, in training this week. Make like Simon said in the comments, too many 6 out of 10 performances. And I would agree with that. But, it can only bode well if they learn from it. And I'm sure they will. And I think Nigel will have them up and running, Saturday. And it wouldn't surprise me if Cargill comes in.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where he did come.
Yeah.
Do you think he'd come in for Brunt, or do you think he'd slot in at left back?
I think it'd be a bit harsh on Brunt if he did come in for Brunt. But, I suppose you could say that for McDonald. But it did look solid when he came on. And whenever I've seen him this year, it does look a solid player.
Is a great person to have in reserve as well. I mean, at the moment, it's just he's coming back from an illness. It's an injury. He's not been played a great deal, but when he's come on, he's been sound. Mm. So that augurs well. On the subject of the game, by the way, there's some environmental issues that I think impacted on the game, the quality of the game overall. It was a stinking hot day. Mm. And by the way, the coach I travelled down on had got broken air conditioning, so most impressed by that. And the pitch itself was hard and bumpy. And in fact, it really surprised me, considering it's a relatively new stadium. They didn't appear to have plumbed in watering systems. They brought some sprinklers out on hose pipes. The big sprinklers, don't get me wrong. But that seems to me, either they've got a system that's failed or they've never had one in the first place. As a consequence, there were parts of the pitch were really wet and parts of the pitch were bone dry. And I think that caught both teams out at times.
Do you think that impacted on Hiram Boateng, because people are obviously picking him out as one of the weaker performances? And I guess if a pitch is inconsistent and the game that he plays, it potentially could, Clive, sort of impact on his style a little bit? Or am I just finding excuses for a poor display?
I think you're becoming an apologist for the lad. I think he has got deft skills, and if he can only play on a bowling green, well, that's tough. We can't guarantee that. He either wasn't fit, wasn't bothered, or for some reason found the position he was in not to suit him, because he looked disinterested. Now, that's probably very unfair, because I can't believe he's disinterested, but that's how he looked. And everybody around where I was sat was saying he ought to come off. Well, Clough recognised that and took him off. But and I think the taking off... who else do we take off? Akins. That was really just to change the shape a little bit and bring in Swan on. And I thought that worked. I'm a big fan of Akins, so I'm not going to criticise his game. But because a lot of what he does is not automatically visible. But I thought the change in shape worked. I thought the Gale is missing it. The opportunity has been given here. Good style. Last couple of games now, he's not been a real threat. And he's not going to get opportunities like this too often.
Yeah, it's an interesting one with James Gale, because I thought the week before he was absolutely tremendous and deserved his place. Maybe it was another one of those things. I think perhaps it's with the style that we play, Alan. We didn't play on Saturday. We were very bitty. We didn't get the ball forward, and he couldn't really do his game, which he's trying to close down and trying to pounce on balls forward, because the service wasn't necessarily there. But again, we were talking last week to look at parallels, that Swan's been poor so far this season.
Yeah.
He came on and changed the game and gave us a little bit of impact and pace. Maybe that's the secret. Whoever starts, whoever comes on, brilliant. So if you're on you're going to be a winner.
I think, in fairness to Gale, he was being marked by a very competent defender, and you didn't give him a great deal of room. And the lad needs a bit of space, and he didn't get it. And we weren't threading balls through to him from midfield in the way that we expect our midfield to do. So I think there are reasons for all these things, and I'm sure that any doubts I've got about the lad will be squashed if he plays on Saturday against Barrow.
When he pops up and scores a hat-trick.
Yeah. Well, by the way, there was another environmental issue that I think you need to be aware of. The yellow flagged linesman. Right. I think he came with somebody who was looking after his guide dog for him. He was useless, honestly. The referee had a decent game, to be fair, but this linesman, he never knew what to do at any time. It was pathetic.
If only Nathan Edge wasn't too busy entering quiz competitions on Heart Radio and trying to make a name for himself on Channel 5 to actually come on the podcast and answer those questions.
Yes.
Questions, keep them coming in the comments and have your say on your team. Let's whiz through a few of them so far. Chris says, yes, style matters, but the graph this season is very good. Speaking of Boateng, Robert says, I think Boateng is the most underachieving player we have right now. I'm going to add a caveat to that, Robert, and I'm going to say that Boateng is the most overrated player that we've got in our ranks, and I wouldn't be disappointed to see him go in the next transfer window. Marie says, Boateng can't run to save his life, has no pace for a big lad, gets pushed off the ball far too quick. I'm also going to add to that, he's only got 1 foot, he can't use his right foot. Another question coming in from Paul. Is Swan lacking confidence at the moment? And do you think Gale and Akins can play together up top too? Well, let's talk Swan first, Alan. And I think the probable simple answer to Paul's question there, is Swan lacking confidence at the moment, will be yes, simply because he's not had game time.
And plus the fact he hasn't got a goal. He hasn't got that. He hasn't had the one-on-one, really, has he? It was similar to Gale, I thought, on Saturday. They seemed to be playing to the right, to me. Instead of down the middle or at the side of Akins, everything seemed to be coming down the right. And that's not really his game, Gale. He's more running and in between. But, it's same as Swan. Swan does that separate as well, because they used to say that for Oates. When they played him on the right-hand side, they used to say that sort of thing for him. But Swan just needs a goal. And I think once he gets that or a couple of goals, we'll see a different Swan.
Yeah, it is all about just getting that monkey off of his back, isn't it, Clive? Getting that first goal will lift his confidence. And, with games and goals does come confidence.
Well, we know he's got goals in him. He proved it last year. So at this stage, I'm prepared to agree with you, Craig. He's not had the practice since his injury and or illness, whatever it was that kept him out of the game, and he hasn't had the minutes yet to redevelop his confidence. It'll come, but he needs to show a little bit more than he did on Saturday.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, like the second part of Simon's questions, Clive, about Gale and Akins playing together, because I think there's probably a case for maybe Gale and Swan to try and play together. I think Gale and Akins are similar type players. Akins will try and hold the ball up. He does a lot of off-the-ball stuff, drops quite deep a lot of the time, as does James Gale. He's a powerful presser of the ball. He's a pressing forward, likes to get it wide if he can. And I don't know, I think there's something about James Gale's game when he's on his A game that can work really, really well with Will Swan. As soon as Rhys Oates is back fit, I think that would be a tremendous pairing as well.
Don't you think that Gale and Swan are two similar players?
No, I don't. I think they're different types of players. I think Swan's got that little bit of pace and can sort of nip in and get on the end of things and do the sort of clever stuff and try and pass and hold up and weave. Whereas I think Gale's a little bit more physical. I think he's got a bit more physicality about him.
Well, in that case, there's no reason why they shouldn't act as a pair of strikers. We don't have nines anymore in football, but it certainly could be two forward players. Then you've got to think about, well, how does that work with DKD and obviously Akins as well. We can go front heavy if we're not careful. My view is that I've always liked having a big bruiser up front, along with a stylish, nippy, faster player. And that's worked over the years very, very well. But I'm not sure it's today's football that accommodates that. we're going to score more goals from the player stood behind the striker. And I think that's because that space is created by good strikers, even if they're not putting goals away. Whether those two can create that sort of space on a regular basis remains to be seen. It's still very early to judge.
Whilst we're on
I
the
think
subject,
that's where Akins comes in, isn't it?
It is, definitely.
Yeah. He would be my first name on the sorry, Craig. He would be my first name on the team sheet because that is what he does. I can see, if Akins came on in the second half, I can't see him having the same impact as he would start in the game. Just my opinion.
yeah, you literally took the topic where I was going right off the tip of my tongue.
Oh, sorry.
Earlier on, you mentioned about Akins and being taken off and whether or not that was a tactical thing or not. I think it probably was to try and get Flint up front. But I don't know. I don't know whether Akins for me is probably the fittest member of the squad other than Jordan Bowery, which says a lot. And he will always give his game, and I'm not slating him one little bit, but I do wonder whether last 2 or 3 games or so, whether he is carrying a little bit of a knock, which Clough's trying to hide, and he's trying to protect him a little bit, because I don't think without, unless he's carrying injury, I don't think Clough would be too inclined to take Akins off, if that makes sense, Alan, with the way he plays.
Yeah, I would agree with that because, it's happened times many, hasn't it, when maybe he's not had such a good game and it just doesn't bring him off for that reason. But I think on Saturday, it did just look a bit undercooked to me. It just didn't seem like the Akins. Now, whether that was because they were, like Clive said, they were calming everybody down, fighting for the ball all the time, pressing hard and whatever, and it spoilt our game, and that was plain for all to see. But Akins, it wasn't getting a lot of the ball, was he? And so maybe, it was just one of those
things. It takes
things.
a lot to have him taken off because we all know that Clough likes Akins, Clough trusts Akins. And I think he would be agreeing with you, Alan, first name on the sheet after Christy Pym. And I think we therefore I've seen something which is a bit unusual, him looking a bit jaded. And he did look a bit jaded, but it could have been a combination of things. But I think taking him off did no harm.
Yeah, Kerry says in the comments, do you think they have had a bug in camp? It's a ability. It's that time of year, isn't it, where weather is changing. You look at the climates and everything. Clive, you're saying it was red hot on Saturday down in Colchester. It weren't that great here. If it had been a home game, it would have been completely different. You look at the weather this week, it's been relatively all right today. Previous 2 days, I've contemplated putting the heating on. So when you're outside training in constant changing weathers and all of that, it's bound to take effect. And when there's a big group there, one will pick it up from the other. So there's a possibility that could be there. But the important thing is, that they did actually get to do what they needed to do, which gets the point, which is get that point on Saturday afternoon. Let's talk Aidan Flint and that masterstroke from Nigel Clough. But when it happened, Clive, did you look around at other people in the stands and think Nigel's doing a Nigel again?
I was surprised. I mean, I can see the logic, but it's a bit Sunday League, I think, to put your defender up front as an act of desperation to get a goal. But he also made the comment, didn't he, Clough, in his interview, that he put him up front there to give that height and a target man, but the rest of the team didn't seem to recognise he'd done it. Yeah. Well, what does that say? How can you move your tallest man in the field up from this normal position up front without knowing he's gone?
Oh, it begged belief, didn't it? Because it was a good move, and I'm not slating it one little bit because it did work eventually. But I think we just need to adapt to it a little bit quicker. So I think, like Clough said in his post-match, we've just been laughing about it there. If they'd have noticed him, we might have actually started playing to him. But also, Alan, you look at it and then you think, well, we've just moved a centre-half up front, and then what have we done to cover it? Well, we've put a centre-forward at centre-back in Jordan Bowery. But no, Bowery's not a centre-forward anymore, is he? Bowery's a Bowery. But
I'd have preferred Bowery to go up, if I'm being honest. But it was interesting. As soon as we got the equaliser, Flint was pushed straight back into defence. His feet didn't touch the floor. He was back in defence.
It was almost like Clough ran on the pitch and dragged him to back and said, that's where you are now. Stay there. Stay there. No,
don't move.
Stay.
At the end of the day, it worked. You know, whether we think it was a good move or not, whether they passed the ball to him enough or not, we got that point. We came away, we robbed a point, and we go again.
The bottom line, it was a 0.1.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to lose games. It would have been a shame to have lost that one. We didn't. We move on.
Yeah. And to be honest, I think it's one of those things, isn't it? Like, I'm surprised it's taken us this long to throw the game. I wouldn't be surprised on Saturday to see Cargill come back in and Flint start up top.
And lose 3-0.
Nothing's changed. You know, anything can happen, can't it?
You never know. Mel says, yes, I was so confused and annoyed he moved Flint up front to start with, but it worked. That shut me up. Simon said, yes, and then Brunt moved forward too. Sometimes with Nigel Clough, he just throws bodies on, doesn't he? And and we just get through games. But do you know what? That's the most important thing, and that's the most impressive thing so far. Touch wood about this squad that we're putting together, Alan. It's the fact that it doesn't matter about positional play. What matters is collaborative desire to stay in the game.
Collaborative desire. I like that, Craig. That would definitely, I want to say that worth a ding if ever I've heard one. It was, and you know, you can't knock it. They're playing really well, because I think probably last season would have lost that. Simple as. But now
we beat Colchester very easy last season, Alan, didn't we? But the Colchester team we beat last season was nothing like the one that turned out on Saturday.
No, I don't particularly mean Colchester Club. I mean, we'd have lost the game. You know, whether it be Colchester, Salford, or whoever. But I can see your point. Because
I have to say, I'm less frightened of going behind now this season than I've been in previous seasons. I just don't think it's the end of the game, you know. Whereas in previous seasons, they score a goal, and you think, "Oh bloody hell, I may as well go and get myself a cup of tea because nothing's going to happen." Well, this season we've on several occasions fought back from goals behind, haven't we?
Let's make it more like Accrington now. Let's get the first goal and the second
and the third.
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, we played across collaboratively well at Accrington. And there wasn't really a weak player. On Saturday at Colchester, we had 3 or 4 players who were not up to that standard for whatever reason, and it showed. And I think the overall performance was as poor as it was because of that. If you look to the bright spots, I thought Pym played well.
Yeah.
I thought Reid played well. Bowery played well.
Who got the man of the match?
Don't know yet. Don't know. No. Was it? I don't think they did a social media vote on it this week's. Again,
I think it was Hiram Boateng.
Yeah.
I don't know, in all honesty, but you know,
all is forgiven.
The midfield was okay with Reid on the ball. He was calm and collected, and he didn't waste many things. But we didn't have that bit of aggression you get with Maris, which brings us back to what you were saying very early on in this conversation. On we missed Maris.
I think we did,
and he's always got a goal in him as well.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see whether he's back available or not on Saturday. And
is he a 4 to 6 or a 6 to 8 weeks?
I don't know. It might be an 8 to 12. You don't know.
I think it's a 50-50 whether he's available or not. Well, I think that's how close it is.
If it's 50-50, it sounds like he might be sat on the bench throughout the game then.
Yeah. Well, we'll wait and see. I mean, Brunt can play in midfield as well, and then you've got your opportunity to bring Cargill back in. One thing we're not short of is, even though we have got X amount of injuries, 5, 6, 7, whatever it is options still.
We've got O'Toole.
Yes.
That bench looks really solid, doesn't it? You know, the more you see it, the more, you know, week in, week out, you know, as the injuries start coming back.
Well, there were no kids on the bench this Saturday. There were no kids on the bench.
No.
Had it in previous weeks, we've had to put kids on the bench to make the numbers up. So things are starting to come back. I mean, there are obviously some really long-term injuries which you can't even think about those, but sooner or later, Macca's going to be back, we hope, and Quinn's going to be back, we hope. Who else are missing on a shortish medium term?
Well, we had Callum Johnson back on the bench on Saturday. He came up a little bit.
Yeah. So I think unless we get another round of tragic injuries, we are actually starting to get better resourced.
Well, I mean, you had to go and say it, didn't you?
I'm sorry. The words were coming out my mouth. I knew. But they're out now. I can't take them back. As Tony Soprano once said, you can't put the shit back in the donkey.
Very belated. I could, I'm not editing it back in. I wasn't. And I don't. So there you go. Right, let's go back to some of your guys' comments. Keep them coming in. Simon says, "What did you think of Clark when he came on?" Clive, what did you think of Clark when he came on?
He wasn't the Clark that we looked to, but I thought he brought a little bit of tenacity.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but a little bit off the pace.
Yes.
But that's only to be expected.
Needs some games, doesn't he? Really needs some games, which we'll come on to later in the show, because whoever needs games, they're going to get games, because we've got fixtures coming thick and fast. When is he going to trust Williams? Well, again, I think it just comes back to what I said 30 seconds ago, Alan, and that is when he's had some game time. I mean, he had 45 minutes for the reserves against Notts County week or so ago now in that Central League Cup fixture. At right back, did all right. Got taken off at half time along with Cargill. He's come on in dribs and drabs, hasn't he? And to be honest, it's not only the thing of having minutes in the tank, but it's also looking at him positionally and looking at him in terms of an order of ranking of who you put in that position. At the minute, he sees him as a right back, and for me, he's third choice right back. Bowery being number one, Callum Johnson being number two.
Yeah, he seems to have come on as left back. He seems to have come on as a midfielder. He seems to have come on as right back. I think it's the same as what you've just said. It all depends where he's needed most at that time.
Shall we give him,
for a bit part player at the moment?
Shall we give him the nickname The Plug? Clive, he'll just come on and plug a gap.
He's good at it, though.
Yeah, it's probably a little bit demeaning to call him a plug. But
a negative.
Yeah, I've not seen enough of him to have a real judgment on the lad. He's not. He looks fine, but he looks unprepared. Whether that's fitness or just lack of match practice, I don't know.
Absolutely. Right, keep your comments coming in. We're going to talk fixtures coming up. We'll also look ahead to the Barrow game on Saturday and talk Carabao Cup as well, as that one is just on our doorstep. Keep having your say on your team in the comments in the live feed. This is the show for the fans, by the fans, and we're proud to be part of the talkSPORT Fan Network. Welcome back to the show for the fans, by the fans. This is the Mansfield Matters Podcast. Still unbeaten at this season, despite playing badly at Colchester on Saturday. But Davies Keeler-Dunn's late goal rescued a point, giving the Stags some much-needed momentum and still some hope as they go into a busy round of fixtures. Starting, Alan, with Barrow at home on Saturday afternoon, the first of a very, very busy period coming up for us, and I'm going to look at the next three games and the next seven, but I'm going to start with the next three. Barrow at home in the league on Saturday, Peterborough at home in the Cup on Tuesday night, and then currently league leaders, Gillingham away the following Saturday. I think I'm going to make a bold statement. In fact, this deserves more than just me saying words. This is a bold statement announcement. A bold statement announcement. I think if we can get through these three games unbeaten, we will get automatic promotion. Thoughts?
That's a very bold statement, that is, Craig.
There are some teams in this league that are already showing their mettle, and Gillingham is one of them. The other one is Swindon Town. It's how we deal with teams like that that really matters, I think. If we can come away from Priestfield Stadium with a point or more, I think that puts us up with the best. But we have to win our home games first. So Barrow's got to be the first notch. Don't care too much about the cup game in the week, if I'm being honest, but it will give some players some chance to show. Sorry, what's the next league game? We've got Gillingham away on Saturday. Who's next?
Wrexham on Tuesday night.
Wrexham, yeah.
At Wrexham.
Yeah, now at home.
Now at home.
Yeah.
I don't think Wrexham are as good as their publicity would have you believe. But having said that, they're there to to compete.
And say they've climbed the league.
They have. There's going to be very few easy points this year. There's far more people have genuine ambition to get into promotion window than there are those that were going to fight for survival. So I think we've chosen a really difficult season to get promoted, but I think we'll do it based on we've got a squad that's better than anybody else's, I think. And we've got players who, when they play well, play better than other players in other teams.
I feel like I need to explain my reasoning for my bold prediction.
Go on then.
I agree with what you've said, Clive, to be honest, about those teams like Gillingham and Swindon, but also I don't think we can underestimate the teams like Barrow. And Barrow, for me, are one of those sides that they've built steadily over the last season or so. They're a difficult side to beat and break down. Look at what happened when we played them last season. We were comfortable against them in that they fought back in the game and ended up winning it, 3-2, and we were 2-0 up. Yeah. A game which ultimately cost us. I think they'll be difficult to break down, and I think if we can get through it, having played like we did on Saturday at Colchester so poorly, if we can get through it and scrap and get a result against a team that are exactly like we played on Saturday, which is scrappy and a little bit at odds, but gritty and difficult, that stands us in good stead. And I know, Clive, you said that you don't care about the cup game, but I do, and here's why. It's not just for the money element. We'll park that. We'll talk more about that in a minute. 10K for a win on Tuesday night. It's about the stature of who they are and who we aspire to be and who we've ultimately built to be. I believe that over the last season or so, we've built up to become a side that is capable of competing at League One level. We've fallen short in getting there with one or two anomalies, whether that be injuries or soft goals to concede. But I think the squads which we've had and the squad which we built now is capable of competing at League One. And what we need at this stage of the campaign, when we've got all these good teams to play, especially going, we're talking about the game here before we go to the league leaders, a team that last season were towards the bottom of the league. They've really built, they're really going for it. They've become a competitor. And what we need to do is we need to show that we are capable of competing against those teams in the division above us. Peterborough are exactly where we want to be. They're a solid, consistent League One team. They're always there or thereabouts when it comes to the playoffs. We've got a good squad and enough players in the tank to rotate it enough to not carry too many knocks and tiredness into that game away at Gillingham on the Saturday, but also to compete and get a victory. And I think if we do that, it says a lot to the other teams in our division psychologically about where we want to be. And we know we're going to have to exit that competition at some point. But given the run of fixtures we have on the back of that game, it's the best thing for us to go and give them a really good competitive game. We played Sheffield Wednesday really, really well in that second half after we conceded that soft goal, and we deserve to get through. Peterborough are a league below that, but at a level we need to be competing at. And for me, if we can beat Barrow, a scrappy team, and beat Peterborough, 2 good home games, it creates a bit of a buzz, a bit of an energy, which we take into that game at Gillingham. We get a point there, or even a victory there. I just think that the momentum that it will have given us, Alan, is enough fire to take into those further fixtures where the games are coming thick and fast. The cold nights are coming in, the heavy pitches are coming in, where the real solidity of the league table starts to take place.
I couldn't agree with you more, 100%, Craig. I just think winning breeds confidence. And I don't agree with this. I'm not bothered about the cup. If we go out, we go out, simple as. But let's go for the jugular. And like you say, it breeds confidence. And there's no reason why we can't do well against them. And the Gillingham, because who's to say that when we've played Peterborough, Gillingham will still be at the top of the league? Who knows? Yeah.
I think my view is there's every opportunity for someone to get injured or sent off in these matches. And that's the downside on it. The FA Cup comes into play in November, of course, and that's slightly different in that the early round games are played on Saturdays. So you're not cramming another fixture in. It's just a different fixture on a Saturday. Don't get me wrong. I want to win. I'd like to beat Peterborough, and I take your point, Craig. It's a good benchmark how much progress we've really made when you're playing a team in the league that we aspire to join. But I'd rather win against Gillingham than win against Peterborough.
Oh yeah, if you offered me, it's either or, then of course I'm going to take Gillingham. But I just think for the momentum that it will bring,
let's have both.
The benchmark. Why not be greedy? Why not get both? The minimum for me, I'm going to say it out now, is a draw against Peterborough and getting knocked out on penalties because it's a lottery. I want to just see us give it a good game because, like we've all said, it's a benchmark of where we want to be. And I think I get your point about injuries and suspensions, but that could happen at Gillingham. That could happen wherever. That could happen in a Central League game, an injury or whatever. I'd rather it be in a competitive fixture against a side that are actually going to give us a game rather than against essentially what were Notts County's under 16s when we played them in the Central League. It's a good test and it's momentum, and it is the prize money as well. You can't deny that.
So do you think we'll put our strongest team out on Tuesday?
Yeah, because we want to win games. I think when we will see rotation is the Doncaster game. That's when Nigel Clough won't care, which I'll rant about nearer the time. But I think Nigel Clough will try and maintain some momentum. If let's say for argument's sake that he sticks with the same 11 that started against Colchester on Saturday, on this coming Saturday against Barrow, I think the rotation he will make is he will probably give Aidan Flint a rest and put Bailey Cargill in. He'll try and get Callum Johnson 60 minutes. He might even try and get George Williams 60 minutes. But even when you put those players in and take the other players like Jordan Bowery or Lucas Akins or Aidan Flint or, whoever, Aaron Lewis or whatever, out, Lewis Reed out, whatever, the players to come in, they're not spare part players. They are players that are still capable of competing at League One level. And I think that's what makes us a dangerous side. We're not just an 11 this season. We are a squad. And that's why I have the same belief as what you said earlier, Clive, about when we go behind in games, we can come back into the games. And I think that's where a lot of this drive comes from. So to answer your question, I think we will put a strong side out with one or two changes. But I think those players who come in will be coming in not just for one game. They'll be coming in to go, I'm taking that shirt, and just build us. Everything's a building process this season. Win every game that's out there.
Well, it's perfectly true. We've got a squad big enough to give Clough a headache every week because it's a better position to be in than he was last season when he was scraping the barrel. But he has got choices to make.
Yeah, but the good choices, aren't
they?
That's
what I'm saying. It's a better position to be in.
Yeah, that's what he'd sooner have those choices. I'll be happy if the next two league games we get at least 4 points and we end up in the hat for the fourth round.
Yeah. The longer the unbeaten run goes on, the more jeopardy it does bring. But, that's part and parcel of football. And I'd rather now, get in that hat for that fourth round where we're going to get potential more bigger money spinner and things like that. We've already got 12k from the game so far, according to some data that I found earlier. 5k for round one.
Yeah.
Round two.
7. Yeah, that's right.
And it's 10 for round 3. You add all that together, that's 22k. And that essentially, pays for a player if we need it in January as well. So be greedy. I think we can cope with games coming thick and fast. We've got to anyway at some point.
Yeah.
So
agree more.
So why not? And looking at those games as well, Clive, we are going to be Saturday, Tuesday for the next 3-4 weeks. Barrow, Peterborough, Gillingham, Wrexham, AFC Wimbledon, Doncaster in the EFL Trophy, and then Notts County, the game that's on Sky. So squad rotation and keeping these players fit and everything is part and parcel of what we want to do, and I think it just gives us a good opportunity now with players coming back in. We're not looking too bad, are we? We were having a little bit of a moan a few weeks ago about how bad the injury table was looking, but it's clearing up.
It is, And no disrespect to Barrow, because I think they're a dangerous side. I think all the other league fixtures we've got in front of us now, up to including Notts County, they're all serious contenders.
Yeah.
If there's a bright light where Gillingham's concerned, is they are 1-0 winners every game. They're not prolific scorers. So providing we can take control of that and bang a couple of goals, we'll beat them. Whereas somebody in the column said that Swindon, on the other hand, are playing for fun. They're banging goals in from everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that particular balloon is bound to burst at some point.
Yeah, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, of course. Roy in the comments says, I remember when we didn't rest players and tried every match, cup or league. Winning breeds confidence, and for a team like ours, a fourth division club, any cup win is fantastic, just for it being every game. And Simon adds, see a strong team against Peterborough, keep the unbeaten run going, and a chance to play a Prem team as well. So, it's about time that we had a good cup run, because I think it just does add to the coffers, and it just does breed that confidence. We're never going to win the Carabao Cup. We're never going to win the FA Cup. So why not rinse the early rounds for money and put it in the bank to get where you want in the league, Alan? That's my logic behind it, anyway.
And who thought we wouldn't have won in '87?
Exactly. Absolutely that. Right, let's turn our attentions to Barrow and, of course, the worst jingle in podcast history. So will they win, lose or draw? And what will be the score? It's the guessing game that brings you zero fame, but to be the best you must outguess the rest. So will they win, lose or draw? And what will be the score? In the League or Cup, you just make it up, because they're just works of fictions. It's podcast predictions. Will they win, lose or draw? So Barrow then up on Saturday afternoon. Podcast predictions will reveal the latest table next week, but I can tell you that Nick Felton is still at the top on 32 points, but Fathead just behind him on 31. That's his name. It's not an insult. It's the name he's using. In terms of the Mansfield Matters group, I can tell you that I'm no longer bottom. It's Nathan, and Alan is still at the top. And with that in mind, it's Alan Wilson to go first in terms of Barrow at home.
I would say a 3-1 win. And I think Akins will come up the goods for the man of the match.
Clive, you're next.
1-0 win. Flint.
Ooh, interesting. I am going to go for a 2-1 win, and I'm going to go for Lewis Reed. And I will also get my prediction in for Peterborough, and I'm going to go for a 2-0 win, and I'm going to go for Callum McDonald. Alan.
Ooh. Can you have 1-1 and go through on penalties?
You can. You might as well just go for a win, though, but you can have either or.
Yeah. Well, I'll go for 1-1 win on penalties for the Stags.
Yeah.
And the man of the match that night, I think Maris might be back.
Clive finishes off.
2-0 defeat, DKD.
Interesting. As always, if you want to play along with podcast predictions, you can do so via the link in the description. And a reminder, you must do so no later than 1 hour and 1 minute before kickoff for your selected game. You can get your predictions in now for Barrow, for Peterborough, and if you want to, Gillingham. We do it month by month, and we'll update you with the latest league table at the end of this month. Lots of games coming thick and fast. Who will be top of the table? Make sure you join us next time to find out. On the guessing game that brings you zero fame, will Clive have to apologise for going for a defeat, or will he be right? Will Alan be spot on when it comes to calling a penalty shootout, or will I be right? Will we cruise through to round 4 and put 10k in the bank? It's all about predictions. We'll wait and see as the Stags take on Barrow and Peterborough in the coming days. Right, that's almost all we've got time for on tonight's Mansfield Matters podcast. Before we do depart, let's talk briefly about Barrow on Saturday. We do need to have a bit of an improved performance, Clive, don't we, from what we put out on Saturday. Does that come with making a few tweaks and changes to the team? I'm thinking the likes of Callum Johnson, Will Swan, maybe for a start, and definitely someone else than Hiram Boateng in midfield, preferably someone who can use both feet.
I think it'll be a different team attitude, a collaborative team attitude against Barrow. I think it's going to be at home. The climate's going to be more conducive. I think the players have every right to be disappointed with the overall performance against Colchester. They'll come out fighting. And I think Barrow will be very, very tough and hard to break down. That's why I've elected for a low-scored game. But I think it'll be a really good game at the right time in our season.
Alan, what about you? I think, Barrow are going to be one of those sides that are going to be really, really tough to beat. And I agree with Clive. I think it's going to be a narrow game.
I think, yeah, possibly. But I've just got a funny feeling that Stags will get an early goal on Saturday and it will lift the mood of the camp, the players, everything.
Q block.
Pardon?
And Q block.
Q block's fine.
There's been some criticism of Q block and the drummer and things in recent weeks, and some of it's unfair, some of it's reasonable. But I do think they need to be jump-started by something on the pitch. To take your point, an early goal gets them fired up. And when they're fired up. And when they're playing flat, as we have done at times, it's very difficult for the cheerleaders amongst the choir to get them going.
It's true, we're there to watch a football match, but in reality, what we are actually needing when it comes to atmosphere is tennis, because we need the players to bat a good performance into the stands, and then we need the fans to bat a positive vibe and energy back onto the pitch. That analogy is absolutely shocking.
It's up there with your best, that one, Craig.
I mean, I'll work on it for next.
You really must do some work before we go on there, because some of your analogies are creative.
Listen, my analogies are absolutely spot on. The one thing about my analogies is the fact that they are spontaneous. They're a little bit different. They're
yours.
Yeah, they're mine. They're made up as they go along. One thing before we do leave, I want to bring your guys at home attention to this, and it's just a little shout out on behalf of Mansfield Museum. And that is in March 2024, there'll be a brand new exhibition at Mansfield Museum, Football, the Beautiful Game. The project will explore all things football, from grassroots and the beginnings of the game to the Premier League and the WSL. They're going to look at how the game is portrayed in TV, film and in gaming, and how it's governed, plus lots more. Part of the exhibition will focus on Mansfield Town, and the museum are keen to speak to supporters about their memories, experiences and love of the Stags. They're going to record these conversations as a video compilation to be played at the exhibit. And they're going to be at Field Mill on Thursday, or the One Call Stadium, on Thursday, the 5th of October, making those recordings. If you've got stories to share and would like to get involved, please email Kirsty Sanders, the Museum Development Officer, which is ksanders@mansfield.gov.uk. I actually went to meet with Kirsty earlier this week to talk about the exhibition, and I know that Nick, our shirts guru, has as well, and Mansfield Matters will be involved in that football exhibition in some way, shape or form. Maybe we'll, have a little bit of a different setting for one of the usual podcasts. Maybe we will hear from a few old faces. Maybe we'll do something completely different. But whatever it is, we'll keep you right up to date here on the Mansfield Matters podcast. And if you do want to get involved, all the details can be found on the Mansfield Museum website, and the post is also on the Stags supporters page as well. Right. That is it. That's all we've got time for tonight on the Mansfield Matters podcast. My thanks, as ever, to the Mansfield Matters podcast panel and to you guys at home for watching and for listening. If you want to get involved with podcast predictions for the Barrow game, for the Peterborough game, The link that you need is in the description. A reminder, you must do it no later than 1 hour and 1 minute before kick-off on the respective games. Can the Stags keep their unbeaten run going? Can they bounce back from a below-par performance at Colchester last weekend as they return home to face Barrow this weekend? Or will the bubble burst at last? The only thing that we can be sure of is that when all is said and done, football is a results-based business. And I'll tell you this for free. Mansfield can play ugly between now and the rest of the season, but as long as they get the results, I could not give a flying how they manage to get promotion as long as they do. We'll see you next time on the show for the fans, by the fans. This is the Mansfield Matters Podcast, and we're proud to be part of the talkSPORT fan network. We'll see you next week as we recap Barrow and hopefully have made it through in the Cup too. If only so I can have banter with Clive. Good night.